All right, in this short video, I'm going to show you guys how to use India ink and nib pens. India ink is a high quality jet black ink. Comes in a jar like this. It's a fluid ink and it is light fast and waterproof. So when we do a drawing with this and then we paint over it, it will not blur or bleed and it will look really sharp. And the pen, like if you purchased a cartridge pen at the store that had the same quality of ink, it would be quite expensive. So this is an economical way to make really beautiful ink work. So you always want to have a paper towel underneath your ink jar. As I said, it's very permanent. So if it gets on your clothing or your artwork, it will be hard to get out. So when you open the jar up, you'll see that there's this little eyedropper. You don't need that for anything, and it can get pretty messy to mess with. So I just set it aside on a paper towel. And we're going to look at our pen here for a moment. So at the tip of this pen, the metal part is called a nib, and the black part is the handle. And they come separately, and then the nib fits into the handle. So if you ever have the nib fall out, know that you're not doing anything wrong. They're just two separate pieces. That hole in the nib is called the reservoir, and the reservoir will fill up with ink when we dip it into the bottle. It's just a kind of a vacuum that kind of keeps the ink there. But if you shake the pen, it can spray ink, so you want to be very careful with that. So from the reservoir to the tip of the nib is actually unattached. So when we push down, you can see two little tines separate at the tip of the nib. That's supposed to happen. With pressure, you open it up and it creates a thicker and thicker line. I wouldn't push any further down till just when you start to see the tines open, that's plenty. If you push further than that, you're going to break the end of the nib. And to get a very light line, you don't push very hard. And to get a thick line, you push just a little harder. So I'm going to dip the nib into the jar just a little bit. This part's very important, so make sure that you always get excess ink off of the nib. Otherwise, you're likely to get a big blob of ink in the middle of your artwork, which is obviously a bummer. So to make a line, you pull towards yourself. And with middle pressure, you get about that thick of line. And then if you push a little harder, you get a much thicker line. I wouldn't go much thicker than that though. And then with no pressure, you get a nice thin line. One of the beautiful features of this kind of ink work is that you can get what's called a weighted or calligraphic line, where it goes from thick to thin in a single stroke. And that can be great if you are into comic books or if you want to do any sort of calligraphic drawing. A lot of illustration will use calligraphic lines. And here I'm going to just draw until my ink runs out so you guys get an idea of what that can look like. You also never want to push your pen forward to draw, which seems really awkward anyway. I have seen people do it, but it's not really what you're likely to do on your own. But if you do that, it will catch, and then you'll get blobs of ink on your paper. So always go either side to side or push or pull your pen towards you as you're drawing. So now you can see it's starting to run out. So then I would just dip it again to continue drawing. So here I want to troubleshoot one thing that can happen. It is possible to get these blobs of ink on your paper. It doesn't mean that your drawing is lost forever. You just want to act really quickly. And that's why you always want to have paper towel at your table. If you get a blob of ink on your paper, I'm going to show you what to do here. So we'll create one. You're going to take your paper towel, fold it into a really small little triangle, and then quickly hold it up to the ink. And then you just carefully touch it to the ink blob, and it will drink up the majority of the ink on the surface. If you can make it so the ink is only on the very outside surface of the paper because the watercolor paper is rather thick. If you do a good job and you act quickly, it won't go through the paper. So the next day, when you return to your drawing, you can take an X-Acto knife, which we have available in the art room, and you can just scratch off that initial surface, and it will obscure most of the darkness in that area. It won't make it disappear entirely, but it'll make it a lot less noticeable. All right. So when you're all done drawing for the day, you always want to make sure that you rinse the nib underneath water for about 5 seconds. It will start to cake the ink on there and ruin the nib over time. So always make sure to wash your pen when you're done.